I'll never forget that early morning. Mist still clung to the little field just outside Galilee. It was peaceful, too peaceful, almost. But inside me, there was a storm of fear. Not because of wild beasts or Roman soldiers, but because he, Jesus, was about to face a challenge that seemed utterly impossible to overcome. He struggled like that, but you won't believe what happened next. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned to uncover the breathtaking truths about his journey. When I was young, I heard stories about him, gentle eyes, healing hands, but no one ever told me those same eyes had seen betrayal at the Last Supper. No one said those very hands would be pierced through, trembling in the cold and writhing pain. You think walking on water was miraculous? Let me tell you something even more shocking. He walked into Nazareth, his hometown, where the very people he grew up with spat out his name like it was poison. He didn't return home to honor. He returned to mockery. And that was only the beginning of a ministry soaked in blood, tears, and an unshakable faith. I remember the day clearly. He stood before a crowded synagogue in Nazareth. They handed him the scroll to read, and he chose a passage that shook the air, the words of the prophet Isaiah, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor." As soon as he finished, it was like the room turned to stone. Every eye fixed on him, piercing and hard. And then he said the unthinkable. "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." The place exploded. Voices rose in outrage. They seized him, dragged him outside, and marched him to the edge of a cliff. They were going to throw him off. No one intervened. No one stood up and said, "Wait, just listen." No, only anger, only rage, only fists clenched in the name of tradition. Ever feel alone, even among people who should support you? Jesus was rejected in the very village he called home. I was just a little distance away. And what chills me even now is the way he turned back and looked at them. Not with fear, but with sorrow. He didn't curse. He didn't scream. He simply walked away, like a man who knew his mission was greater than their hatred. Sometimes I ask myself, how does a man keep preaching love when the world throws hatred back in his face? But that's exactly what made him different. He didn't preach with power or clever manipulation. He blazed a path with his own flesh and spirit. Every step was a new wound, every town another sneer, every word another reason for someone to plot his death, and still he walked on. If you've ever felt too weak to do the right thing, remember, Jesus was attacked, rejected, abandoned, but he never stopped. He didn't go to the wealthy or the powerful, no. He went to the broken, the weary fishermen, the despised tax collectors, the women society had cast aside, and to them he said, "Follow me." Do you understand what that means? When you're the one no one believes in, no one trusts, no one gives a chance, and someone like Jesus looks at you and says, "I need you." That's not just a calling. That's the redemption of a soul the world had forgotten. But with that choice came hardship. No home to rest, no guarantee of food, no safety. And worst of all, every truth he spoke was another nail in his own death sentence. Have you ever chosen what's right, knowing it might cost you everything? Stay with this story. Subscribe and keep watching. What he endured next is more intense, more powerful than you can imagine. You see, after that day in Nazareth, after they nearly hurled him off the cliff, he didn't retreat. He didn't disappear into the shadows. No. He kept moving from one village to the next, from dusty back roads to crowded hillsides. He preached. And with every word he spoke, something stirred in people's hearts, hope or hatred. There was never indifference. I walked with him into Capernaum once, just a small fishing town right along the sea, nothing fancy. But oh, the people there, they were desperate. The blind stumbled through the streets, the sick moaned in corners, demons howled in the shadows. They had heard of him, whispers of healings, rumors of demons cast out. And they waited, hungry, trembling, not for truth, but for a miracle. If you're watching this and you've ever prayed, "God, just show me a sign," this is for you. Hit that subscribe button and stay close, because the signs were real and yet they came with a price. When he stepped into the house of Simon, Simon's own mother-in-law was burning up with fever. The house reeked of illness. The air was thick. But Jesus, he didn't hesitate. He touched her hand. That's all. One touch. And just like that, she stood up, strong, whole. It was instant. People outside screamed when they saw her walking. And that night, They came. I mean, they came like a flood. The streets outside Simon's house were filled with hundreds, maybe more. Mothers clutching dying children, old men dragged on mats, the possessed, the broken, the forgotten, all pressing in toward him. He healed. He healed them all. But I saw something strange that night, something I didn't understand at first. As the miracles multiplied, so did the danger. The more he healed, the more the religious leaders watched, and their eyes weren't filled with awe, they were filled with suspicion. You'd think they would celebrate, but no. To them, his power was a threat. A man healing without asking permission, a man teaching without being approved, that was rebellion. And soon the whispers began. He heals by the power of demons. Yes, they actually said that. Can you imagine? The one who silenced demons, accused of working with them? If that makes your blood boil like it did mine, share this video. Someone else needs to know what he truly endured. But the pressure didn't stop there. As we moved from town to town, the crowds grew, and suddenly, people weren't listening anymore. They weren't hanging on his words. They just wanted more miracles, more wonders, a free show, like spectators at some traveling circus. And I remember one night after he had spent the entire day healing and preaching, his robe soaked in sweat and blood from a leper's touch, he slipped away before dawn. I found him alone, praying on a hill. His face was streaked with tears, and I asked him, "Why are you crying? They love you, don't they?" He looked at me with eyes so heavy, so broken, and said, "They love what I do, not who I am." That shattered me, because he wasn't just a healer. He wasn't a magician. He came to give life, eternal life. But they wanted temporary fixes, food, healing, sight. They didn't want truth. They wanted comfort. How often do we treat God the same way, loving the blessings but ignoring the voice? If you felt that tension in your own walk, you're not alone. Stay here. Subscribe, like, share. This story is for you. It got worse in Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem, that city devours prophets like wolves rip flesh. We entered through the east gate, and the people were screaming his name, laying down cloaks, palm branches. You'd think a king was returning from war, but I saw it in his eyes. He knew. He knew the same mouths shouting, "Hosanna," would cry, "Crucify him," just days later. There was this moment, a moment that haunts me. He stood outside the temple, looked at it, so grand, so holy in appearance. And then, with a voice low but fierce, he said, "This is supposed to be a house of prayer, but you've made it a den of thieves." He flipped the tables, coins flew, doves scattered, merchants screamed, and that was when they decided he had to die. Not because he lied, not because he stole, but because he told the truth so loudly it cracked the masks of every hypocrite in power. Have you ever lost friends because you stood for truth? So did he, but he never backed down, and neither should you. They plotted in the shadows. Priests, scribes, Roman sympathizers. He knew it. He knew every name, every scheme, every coin exchanged. And still, he kept teaching. He told parables that cut to the bone. He welcomed sinners in the courts where they were forbidden. He touched the unclean. He ate with the rejected. And all the while, the noose was tightening. Every night, we'd walk outside the city walls, hide among the olive trees, whisper prayers in the cold wind. The danger, it was constant. But he never showed fear. Not once. What he did show was heartbreak. Because no matter how close the crowd pressed in, he was alone, and the people, the very people he came to save, were sharpening the nails that would soon tear through his skin. We're just getting to the darkest hour, when betrayal comes not from enemies, but from a friend. When faith is tested, not in the storm, but in the silence. We had just finished supper, the kind of quiet meal where every breath feels heavy. Jesus had washed our feet, the teacher, bending down like a servant. I remember his hands trembling slightly as he wiped mine. It was as if he was feeling every moment slipping away. Then he said something that froze the room. "One of you will betray me." If you've ever felt the knife of betrayal from someone close, this is your moment to lean in. Subscribe, stay right here, and don't look away. What comes next is not just a story. It's the moment the world cracked open. We all looked at each other, stunned. Who could betray him? We'd walked with him, laughed with him, watched him raise the dead. It didn't make sense. And then he dipped the bread, handed it to Judas. There was something so haunting in that gesture, so intimate, so final. And Judas, he took it without hesitation. His eyes didn't show guilt, just darkness. Jesus leaned in and whispered, "What you are about to do quickly." And Judas stood, walked out into the night. Into the night. That phrase echoes in my head even now, because that's where betrayal always begins, in the shadows. Have you ever trusted someone who later turned your life upside down? He trusted Judas with everything, and still he sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Later that night, in the Garden of Gethsemane, the silence was unbearable. Jesus knelt under the olive trees. His body shook. I could hear him weeping, whispering into the ground, "Father, if it is possible, take this cup from me." I'll never forget the sweat dripping off his face like blood. Yes, like blood. I saw it. I was there. His anguish was so intense, so heavy, it tore something open inside me. He wasn't afraid of death. He was grieving the weight of the sin he was about to carry. My sin. Yours. If you think Jesus never struggled, never cried, never felt the crushing pressure of obedience, you don't know the real Jesus. He felt it all, and still, he said, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." And then, the torches. The soldiers arrived, metal armor clanking, swords drawn, and leading them was Judas. He didn't yell, he didn't point, he kissed him. That was the signal, a kiss. The moment their hands grabbed Jesus, I wanted to fight. I drew my blade. I don't even know where I found the courage, and I struck a man's ear. Jesus stopped me. He healed that man, his enemy, right there. Even as they shackled his wrists, he healed, and they dragged him away. We followed at a distance, hiding in alleyways, behind pillars. Trial after trial, mock trial after mock trial. False witnesses, twisted words, laughter from the high priests. He stood silent through it all. Like a lamb, they spat on him, slapped him, stripped him, and still he did not resist. Do you understand what that means? He could have called angels, could have turned the earth inside out, but he didn't, because he chose the cross. He chose the pain for us. Would you stay silent while the world destroys you, just to save the very ones holding the hammer? That's what he did. That's Jesus. And when Pilate stood before the crowd and asked, "What shall I do with Jesus?" they shouted, "Crucify him." The same people he had healed. The same mouths that had cheered him 5 days earlier. They chose Barabbas, a murderer. He was whipped, the kind of whipping that tears skin. I saw his back, flesh hung in ribbons, his face was swollen, blood soaked his robe, if you could call it a robe anymore. Then came the cross. He carried it. Not just a beam of wood, he carried our guilt, our secrets, our shame, every foul, broken part of us. And on that hill, Golgotha, they nailed him down. I heard the sound, the hammer, the screaming, the bone cracking. I saw the sky turn dark at noon. The ground shook. It was as if creation itself couldn't watch. He cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And in that cry was every abandoned soul who ever lived. But then, just before he died, he said, "It is finished." Not, "I am finished." No, "It is finished." That was not defeat. That was declaration. The work was done. The debt was paid. The path was cleared. Heaven had opened. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence, of hiding, of guilt, of fear. And then the stone moved. The tomb was empty. He was alive, not just revived, not resuscitated, resurrected. He showed us the scars, let Thomas touch them. He ate with us, walked with us, smiled with us, but his eyes, oh, his eyes, they had eternity in them. He had won, not by swords, not by armies, but by surrendering completely to the Father's will. He suffered like no, but it wasn't the nails that held him, it was love. And that love is for you. So if this story moved you, if it pierced something deep inside, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who's hurting. Come back for more, because we're not just telling stories. We're rediscovering the greatest truth the world has ever known, that Jesus endured the impossible just to make your salvation possible. And that's not the end. It's just the beginning. This completes our journey through the hardships of Jesus's ministry, but it opens a door for your faith to deepen. Subscribe, follow, and return, because there's more to uncover, more to believe, and more to live for.